Birch Society Report. George Washington stated, "Truth will ultimately prevail where pain is taken to bring it to light." Truth is the major weapon of the John Birch Society Report. We will return after these words from our sponsor. The John Birch Society Report presents this weekly broadcast to bring you commentary and analysis of today's events. Our commentator today is Mr. Thomas J. Anderson, well-known columnist and humorist of Nashville, Tennessee, and president and editor-in-chief of Southern Farm Publications. Mr. Anderson's topic: This is a confession.
This is a confession. The flesh is indeed weak. Recently, swept along by dubious companions and the passions of the moment, I joined the Republican Party. In the South, friend, this requires a lot of courage. For as many years as I can remember, in fact, you might say for as many years as have passed, since my grandmother as a little child hid out in the cornfield while the Yankee soldiers burned down the old home place, it has been sort of a social disgrace to be a Republican in the South. Of course, many of us have voted Republican through the years, but voting Republican and being a Republican is a king of another color. A friend of mine says he doesn't belong to any organized political party. He's a Republican. I guess he's right. But maybe he's just mad because he's about to be purged for belonging to that monolithic John Birch Society. My friend says the next thing you know, old Molasses Mouth Dirksen and his fellow Republican revisionists are going to purge Catholics. They are monolithic too. Funny thing, you can be a prostitute, pervert, jailbird, or anarchist and be welcomed into the Democrat Party. You can even hold high position. But the Republican Party is exclusive and dead. One thing you can say about the John Birches: they support our local police and try to obey all laws, good and bad. It's the keepers of the Republican Party who are now violating the law. It is illegal in this country to refuse to give decent burial to a corpse. That breath of life you detect in the Republican Party's caucus is not republicanism, it's white backlash. Yet we can try for a while the miracle of resurrection. The Republican Party in the South has been largely dominated by two elements. One, the let's get in any way we can do it better and cheaper element. Two, the hardcore hangers-on who are determined to keep the party in their little hot hands so that when and if the party wins the presidency, they will be in charge of the goody poke to hand out the patronage and pass around the graft. Them fellas are the keepers of the corpse. The most violent infighting going on in the South right now is not Democrat versus Republican or Americanist versus communist. It is Republican versus Republican. Or perhaps more accurately, Republican versus would-be Republican. Of course, we conservatives have our minor differences of opinion, like the bride-elect who was describing her differences with her fiancé. I want a big church wedding, she said, and he wants to break the engagement. Lots of us are going to break the engagement with the Republican Party if it nominates the likes of Romney or Nixon. In Nashville, Tennessee, where I live, the Birchites, as they are affectionately called, got sore finally from being kicked in sensitive places and tired of being told to go hide in the kitchen every time company was entertained in the parlor. So they decided either to get in or out of the county Republican Party. And that's where I came in. Those subversive creatures insisted that, as an additional warm body, I must go to the meeting held to elect a county chairman and a steering committee, to which I resignedly replied, as the fellow who had to ride with his mother-in-law to his wife's funeral said to the undertaker, "I'll do it, but it's going to ruin my whole day." My presence was challenged, and I was hauled before the Credentials Committee, the chairman of which was an old acquaintance. "Are you a Republican, Tom?" he asked crudely. "I am today, Charlie. How long do I have to be one?" I replied. "Just today," he said. "Okay," I replied, "sign me up for today." So that was how I was had. But when the stroke of midnight came, Cinderella Anderson reverted once again to a ragged but honest independent. At that meeting, we Republicans elected our man chairman and got 6 people on the 75-member steering committee, one of whom was my Birchite wife. And then the roof fell in. Birch's Takeover headlined the leftist Nashville, Tennessean newspaper, which runs the local Democrat Party so successfully that it naturally figures that it should control the Republican Party too. The moderate Republicans hereabouts constantly run scared of what the Tennessean is going to say. This makes as much sense as the Pope being intimidated by a local rabbi. The Tennessean depicted poor little innocent me as the callous conniver who had plotted this dastardly coup. I didn't even know the candidate we were going to elect. In fact, I had never heard of him until the day before when my wife filled me in and gave me my orders. My control over my wife is equal to the weatherman's control of the weather. Incidentally, our winning candidate happened to be a Jew. You may not believe it, but we refrain from accusing the Tennessean of anti-Semitism. An anti-Semite is a person who hates Sammy Davis Jr. because he married a Gentile. Unlike Bobby Kennedy, a group of conservative would-be Republican women decided they did not want to force themselves in anywhere they were not wanted, so they started a new club. They named it the Robert Taft Republican Women's Club. In a month they had 100 members, but they haven't got a Republican charter yet, and they aren't likely to. They've been accused by the keepers of the corpse of having loyalties superseding those to the Republican Party, like to God, family, country, and truth, and of having different goals from the Republican Party. The goal of the moderate Republicans is get elected. In the meantime, the husbands of those ladies are constantly begged for money by the Republican Party. One of the enemy moderates telephoned a whine to Charles P. Taft in Cincinnati, and the old bubblehead forthwith issued this statement, which he sent to the president of the new club, quote, "Since so many of your principal members have been involved in the Let Freedom Ring operation, and since your club has been principally sponsored by the Tom Anderson family, I feel the use of the name Robert Taft in the name of your club is most unfortunate," close quote. There are only 2 things about which I now remember disagreeing with the great Senator Taft. 1, he voted for the public housing bill. 2, he supported all Republicans except one. When Charles P. Taft ran for the Senate against Frank Lausche, Robert Taft came out against his own Republican brother. Charles Taft also wrote the president of the National Republican Women's Federation to this effect, quote, "But I do wish to register my protest at the use of my brother's name in connection with this club. If you do at any time decide to approve their application, I hope the elimination of his name will be made a condition," close quote. I had and have nothing to do with the choice of the Taft name. If it has to be changed, I have 2 suggestions for the girls. 1, forget the Republican Party. 2, if unwilling to abide by suggestion number 1, name it the Joe McCarthy Republican Club. So, friends, as you can plainly see, being a Republican ain't easy. A nose by any other name smells. Which reminds me of the Frenchman who went into an American restaurant knowing what he wanted but was unable to call it by name, and he asked the waitress, "Mademoiselle, what is the name of the bird, the cock-a-doodle-doo?" "The rooster?" "Oui, the rooster. And how is it that you call the madam of the rooster?" "The hen." "Oui, the hen. And who is the child of the madam of the rooster?" "The chick." "Oui, the chick. And what is the chick before he is the chick?" "The egg." "Oui, I'll have 2 of him." The Monsieur Charles Taft laid 2 of him. So, friends, I think you'll agree, being a Republican these days is not easy. In fact, being a conservative isn't easy. Because if you want to be a typical conservative, you not only have to fight the enemy, you have to fight each other. Some conservatives I know spend more time and effort fighting each other. Of course, I could never become what's popularly known as a good Republican, or a good Democrat, or a good third-party member. A good party man is one who puts party ahead of principles. He who wears the collar of the party must pay the penalty, degradation. Most Republicans have a simple platform: get in. Whatever it takes, get in. I've argued long and loud with these people for 25 years. Some of them say with sincerity, as did Goldwater of Nelson Rockefeller, if we get him in, we can convert him, which is another version of that ancient cliche, you have to get elected before you can be a statesman. To which the obvious answer is, name me one man who ever ran on a liberal platform and turned conservative when he got in. Or, name me one man who ever lied his way into office and then turned honest. That theory is as ridiculous as the claim that once Red China gets in the United Nations, she'll mellow and get civilized, like the other comrades and cannibals. Now, I've certainly tried to make this broadcast on politics moderate, friends. You will note that I have not once referred to cheap politicians. There are no cheap politicians. They are all expensive. There are, of course, a few honest politicians, but they are as unusual as a five-letter word at Berkeley. As Mark Twain observed, an honest man in politics shines more than he would elsewhere. But let us give credit where credit is due. Many of you have doubtless seen the performances of the trained fleas at the fair. It is quite remarkable what fleas can be trained to do. So let us take comfort. As Mark Twain observed, fleas can be taught nearly anything that a congressman can, and vice versa.
We want to thank all those who've taken time to listen to the John Birch Society Report, which has again focused attention on important subjects directly involving you. Our commentator today has been Thomas J. Anderson. If you would like a copy of today's message, please send 50 cents for one copy or $1 for 3 copies to the John Birch Society Report, San Marino, California. Please enclose a stamped, self-addressed envelope. Ask for